to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I'm in conversation with the Director of Retail Operations for FireFly Farms and the General Manager of FireFly Farms Market Baltimore. Please welcome Jesse Galdston.
Thank you, Rob. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Again, appreciate you coming on, being able to spin a yarn with me. And before we get too deep into the podcast, I want to start off by allow people to talk about themselves. I think that's a thing that I realized that people either enjoy talking about themselves or they hate talking about themselves. But let's frame it in a way. Could you tell us about your growing up and kind of ultimately one of your first experiences that kind of led you into this kind of realm of food and beverage? I see an interesting background there for you, but I want to start off there.
Sure. So I think of myself as someone who I ended up a relatively unique individual, but the kind of broad strokes of my background have a certain, I wouldn't necessarily say cliche, but like it's right out of central casting. When people ask me where I'm from, I just say I'm your quintessential Upper West Side liberal Jew type. And it's... it's very on the nose. I went to high school with a Zabar. So it's very, very Upper West Side. And I think it goes even further than that from kind of even the great-grandparent generation down. It's like most of my great-grandparents were Jewish immigrants from Europe, mostly Eastern Europe, a little bit of Sephardic Judaism, like Portugal vibes. But then they were successful enough to where their kids had good enough jobs, my grandparents, to move out to live the suburban dream in Long Island and Westchester, respectively. And then my parents, like many of their generation, decided, oh man, we actually love the city. Let's go back to the city after college. And they just stayed. So, but I mean, yeah, it's a very New York story. It's like even down to the fact that, I came from a reasonably well-to-do privileged background, kind of went to a rich white people type of high school, was one of the least wealthy people paying full tuition, but also it's a rich white people high school, right?
Right.
You got to understand where you're coming from. But even there, my parents wouldn't be able to afford the apartment they own now if they had to buy it.
Oh, wow.
It's very New York.
Wow.
It's very New York. If you meet people from New York, it's I think a reasonably common story in the broad strokes. So that's the broad spectrum background. My dad's a songwriter. My mom is a speech pathologist, specializing in pediatric speech pathology. Yeah, she's a boss, as is my dad. I think if you know anyone who makes a living really to support themselves doing music or most creative endeavors, you should respect them on a very deep level. That's a firm opinion I have about life, having met a lot of musicians in my time.
I dig it.
But my life in food, I started out as an insanely picky eater. My parents were actually reasonably adventurous eaters before I was born and through my life, but I kind of curtailed my family's eating to a certain extent because I was absurdly picky. Honestly, I would say I was on the picky end of the spectrum into my mid-20s. Certainly when my wife and I got together in college, she kind of helped me learn to love vegetables. I had a very thin list. I didn't even eat salad regularly until I was in my mid to late 20s. I didn't like cheese besides pizza until I was about 25. And now I am a cheesemonger. So yeah, it was just little by little. Starting in my mid-teens, I started to really expand my horizons, and it was kind of a pretty straight line on the graph, upward incline of liking more and more foods. It just took me a long time to catch up once I started to do that. But I always loved to eat. I just loved to eat a very small number of foods, and they were basically fried chicken product, pizza, things doused in Frank's Red Hot. And
you put that S on everything.
Oh yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so those were my main food groups. But I always loved to eat. My dad had a collaborator he worked with for years who would constantly say that he would pay to watch me eat because I just loved it so much. So Yeah. I would say, I think the like inner fat person is a reductive, facile cliche, but
Yeah.
I also literally used to eat myself sick.
Oh no.
Like I would be like, oh my God, I need like a hot compress on my stomach. I'm in pain because I couldn't control myself when I loved things. So
I remember
yeah,
this bit. I forget the comedian. He was talking about he's eaten himself out of breath before, and I was like, look, I'm a larger person. I've never done that. I'm very conscious about what I eat. However, if there are certain things that I like, I'm going to get a little loose on it. And I'm a fan of cheese. I'm a fan of cheese. So
yeah, I
we're
love
going to
that.
talk we're going to talk about a little bit. Let's talk about Firefly Farms Baltimore. Let's talk about the market.
Sure.
Give us
Yeah.
the rundown for those who are undipped, unfamiliar with it. Describe like what you do ultimately and what the whole like setup the market is about.
Sure. So we are a stall in an indoor market in a redeveloped mill in the Jones Falls Valley. So we are on Clipper Mill Road in one of these historically listed mill buildings, and we're one of several stalls in what's called Whitehall Market. It's a really, really cool space. It's absolutely beautiful. The landlord did an amazing job with the build out. They kind of purpose built all the stalls for us. So it's a beautiful, beautiful space, and you're right on the water. It has one of my favorite places to eat in the city, which is a little picnic table on a deck that's actually over the water. So
Nice.
it's quite magical. And we started as a cut to order cheese shop. So cut to order cheese and meat. So we cut what size piece of cheese you want. You can taste almost anything in the store unless it's something that's vacuum sealed. And even then, probably we can make it work if we really need to. We price everything by the pound, but you can tell me your weight. You can come in and say, oh, I want one finger. Or you can say, oh, I'm having, my last customer before I went home today was, oh, it's 4 adults and a toddler, we're having grilled cheeses. So I can give you some guidance on what I think you should buy, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the meat. We have cheese focused sandwiches. We make personal sized cheese boards, which is kind of like the cool cheese plate that you would get at a bar or restaurant. We make cheese platters, which are more kind of thing you see on Instagram that looks amazingly cute for a large group of people. And then we have a massive selection of dry goods, gourmet dry goods of various sorts from across the world. A small amount of refrigerated things, but we don't have as much fridge space as we want, and the drinks take up most of that. But so, everything, we started as originally just things that go with cheese pretty specifically. And kind of the most out there we got was like, oh, we have a little bit of farro, but to me, if I'm making farro, I'm putting cheese in it. So in my mind, that makes sense. We've gradually loosened that a little bit, where we have a couple more things that in my mind are maybe associated with fine food, cheese and meat things, but aren't truly necessarily cheese accompaniment, or primarily that. And then over relatively early on, about 4 months after we opened, the market got a liquor license. And because it was COVID, due to the state of emergency, we actually could sell package, even though it was an on-premise license. We could sell bottled wine, like whole bottle wine, whole bottle beer, etc. That went so well, we decided to buy a package license, and we now have we expanded into the stall next to us. So now we have an entire stall that's just a wine shop.
I've purchased wine from there before. So here's the thing. Like, I really like the stand like a lot. Whenever I go to Whitehall, that's one of the stands that I pop over to, either to get maybe a sandwich, either to get cheese, or even go next door and get a bottle of wine or what have you. And that's ultimately how this whole thing came together, I believe. I talked to maybe the dude there, and I was like, who runs the stand? Like, can I get like this guy's information? Can I contact?
I love that. I'm always happy to hear that someone had a positive experience at the stall, because my foremost principle in this is having good food and drink is the bare minimum. Really, it's, do you walk away with a smile on your face? It's a hospitality business, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm very
you know,
glad to hear that.
yeah, totally. And I think, more than ever, it has to be a bit more of a focus around that. Like, I don't want anyone like kissing up to me, anything along those lines. But I want to go there and have good stuff. That's a prereq. And then like it's this acknowledgement of there's a business. People can be very discerning of where they put their money at. So, and I think
100%.
some people lost that. I think some people lost that concept. But
I
let's
don't disagree with that.
yeah. Let's rewind a little bit because I got some cheese questions.
Sure.
What does a cheesemonger do? I mean, I have used the term cheesemonger in comedic purposes, but what does a cheesemonger do?
Sure. So, essentially, a monger is someone who is an expert in something and sells that thing. Roughly speaking, it tends to go with a couple of things in our culture, colloquially, right? It's going to be fish or most likely cheese. I will admit I'm not as up on the etymology as maybe I should be, but I think of it as I am your cheese expert in multiple ways, both in terms of knowing about the cheese, who made it, where it comes from, what's in it, how it's made, but also practically, like, how do you cut this cheese? How do you store this cheese? How would you use this cheese at home? What is a portion size, etc.? Obviously, there are subjective aspects to all of these things, but I make sure that I and hopefully our entire staff who monger to people have a lockdown on these basics.
I dig it. So, I'm going to be a little self-serving here, and also we have to drop gems. You mentioned one of the last your last customer of the day was a grilled cheese hunt.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What would you say? Like somebody knows nothing about cheese, like. What is the ideal cheese for like a standard grilled cheese as far as like the cheeses that are at the stall? And what is the more out there sort of like grilled cheese that you've actually made? And you're like, you know what, I'll do this.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So for me, the standard grilled cheese, generally I think of one of two things. I'm either thinking cheddar or I'm thinking Alpine cheese. Alpine cheese is kind of a group of cheeses that roughly all follow the style that was originated in the Alps. The most kind of classic examples would be Gruyere or Comté. Mm-hmm. So we have a great, relatively kind of young Gruyere. I think it's perfect. The younger ones they don't have as an intense of a flavor necessarily, but also they will melt better. And so I think if you're someone who's thinking cheese and pickle always, like some people are like, it's not a grilled cheese without a pickle in it. Those people want to go Alpine. Yeah. I think if you're more interested in a plainer grilled cheese, I always think the acidity of a cheddar is really what you want, right? That sharp quality, that tanginess, always is really what makes the cheese pop. In our stall, what that means is we chop and change our cheddars a fair bit, particularly at the kind of high end. Mm-hmm. But at the entry level, we have what I think is far and away the best block cheddar that's made in America. It's Shelburne Farms cheddar. They make multiple different age profiles. We carry the 2-year. It's that perfect mix of acidity, but also breadth of flavor. It's not like 15-year aged cheddar that has been in a vacuum seal for years and years and just tastes sharp. It's aged in a vacuum seal, but also it's a single herd of cows in a single place that get mostly grass and hay, that they're raw milk. So it's got some character to it beyond just supermarket cheddar, albeit I love supermarket cheddar. I've definitely been known to smash a Cabot Seriously Sharp whenever. But Shelburne is, it has a special place in my heart. If you ever get the chance to go up there, I would strongly recommend a visit to the inn at Shelburne Farms. It's on an old Vanderbilt estate. And if you walk, you can walk out the back of the inn and you go down the steps and you're about 150 yards from an almost panoramic view of Lake Champlain. It's quite magical.
Wow.
Yeah. Worth a visit.
So that sounds.
In terms of out there stuff, in terms of out there, man, I've done so many things. I used to when I cheesemongered up in the Boston area. I used to teach we called it a class. It wasn't truly a class, but it basically was a grilled cheese throwdown, and it would just be you versus another cheesemonger for fun. And customers would get between 6 or 8 different grilled cheeses because each person would make 3 or 4. So probably, let's see. One of my favorite ones is kind of a take on a classic Basque combination. You don't see it necessarily as a grilled cheese in the actual Basque region, but it's what I think of as the classic Basque flavor. So you do sheep's milk, semi-firm sheep's milk cheese, a brebis, although brebis is kind of like pecorino. It basically just means sheep or ewe. So but that is a style from that region. Like Osao Rati is the most famous one there. So the sheep's milk is like a rich, unctuous, very fatty sheep's milk cheese, cherry jam, and then a spicy pork salami made with the famous Basque pepper piment espelette. So that's a favorite. And then I've definitely done some really fun dessert grilled cheese with blue cheese and dark chocolate, which I love. It's an awesome combination. If you've never done it, could not more highly recommend it, whether you melt it or not. So just like good sourdough, a blue cheese that has at least a little bit of sweetness to it, but you got a lot of options. I'm always a big Stilton or Stilton style guy, but you could do something as sweet as like a goopy Gorgonzola Dolce, even if you wanted. And then whatever your favorite good dark chocolate is, whether that has salt or not, I would recommend adding crunchy sea salt because crunchy sea salt makes everything better.
You're selling the ticket there because you're speaking my language when it comes to one. I'm a huge like mark for blue cheese to the degree where I remember I used to get a really like this is when I was just living a glutton's life, but getting a really like extra large pizza, and I would get something a combination that I loved, but it was very specific. It was like spinach, broccoli, extra cheese, and blue cheese crumble. No one else was touching that pizza. It was delicious. And that whole combination is I never think of the dessert and cheese other than maybe like a cheesecake or some type of Danish. I don't really think of those two things as sweets, but dark chocolate is not sweet. So having like the sweetness come from a cheese or what have you're getting that unctuous, you're getting that fatty, that maybe a little tangy. And I know a lot of people who they trust my culinary whatever, but they're like, nah, I don't like gorgonzola or blue cheese. It's like, well, you are missing out.
Yeah, it's a deep sadness when you find out a friend doesn't like blue cheese, I will say. I mean, on the one hand, great, more for you, but it's sad you can't share the blue cheese because I'm with you. For me, blue cheese is every meal of the day. In fact, I will say probably, I live the food life, so I have Sunday, Monday as my day off. Regular weeks, and I'd say probably 50% of my Mondays off when it's just me solo in the house doing errands. I have blue cheese or lunch of some sort. Normally blue cheese on toast with jam or blue cheese with we have these we have a flavor of Tirali that I've never come across before. Tirali's those little, they kind of look like like little tortellini crackers almost.
Oh yeah.
They're from Puglia. Yeah, it's a Southern Italian thing. But they normally are plain or fennel, or if you're getting a little weird with it, like chili. We have one that is caramelized onion and sultana, which I'd never even thought of, but it is the most magical blue cheese pairing. So,
I noticed you guys. I noticed you guys have the, I think it's these chips too. These, I think the Torres chips.
Oh yeah.
Those are the bomb or what have you. And you guys have the big bags. I've only seen the small ones. And literally whenever I go to a place that has them, I get them. And it's just, I do the thing that one does at, what is it? The Wine Collective, the angry bar fries with the chili paste.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And a little of the aioli. Yeah. So you touched on earlier about cheese boards and things of that nature, and I know that they can be very intimidating and expensive. I've gone to entertain just because my girlfriend needed to cheer up. She wanted to cheer up, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go there. I bought $200 worth of cheese just to make some bougie cheese plates for her. How would one start off by planning like a cheese board? Like you have foundational elements. It's almost like doing fantasy football, right? Because we're coming up on that time. Yeah. It's almost that. It's like, who's your quarterback? How many running backs are you getting? What are your cheeses in that regard?
Sure. So the first thing is I would say there's no shame in paying someone else to make it for you. So we're always happy to do that service, but there are other places you can do that too. And that can be a very cost-effective way to do it as compared to buying it for yourself. Now,
Sure.
that said, do I do that in my personal life? No, I don't. I always make my own. I'm one of the laziest cheese board makers in my personal life. I will say that. I just put big pieces of cheese on a board and I eat it. I know a lot of people eat with their eyes. I'm not one of them. This is controversial, I know, because I literally make these things for a living from time to time. But in all candor, that's not my go. That said, I think if you are picking cheeses, in terms of the selection of cheeses, I always like to think of you kind of, this is a weird metaphor. Have you ever played the game Set?
No.
The nerdy card game. So you're trying to do basically there's three types of shapes, there's three colors, there's three gradations of shading, and you're trying to pair them, and you kind of can go either all the same or all different in any category. And this is a little bit the way I like to think about it. So you either want to do things that are quite similar along a certain dimension or quite different along a certain dimension. I lean towards the different. Mm-hmm. So I'm normally thinking, okay, something that is soft, something that is firm to semi-firm, and then either something, if you did the semi-firm, something that's firm, or if you did the firm, maybe a blue. So you're getting diversity of styles. I also like to think about diversity of milk types. So I'm normally going to try to go at least one, I think the standard is cow cheese. That's most cheese. But I'm normally thinking at least one goat or sheep and maybe one of each. If I'm really going for it, I'm going to go one goat, one sheep, one cow. So those are the two main ways I like to think about it, is just diversity on the plate. Also, you can also think visually though, right? Like if you're making a board, it is a visual medium in a certain way, even though you're going to eat it at the end and you're going for a visual impact. So I would say don't be too ashamed to choose based on the way it looks. If you like how it looks, you like how it looks. If you're at a good shop, all the cheeses are going to be tasty. Mm-hmm. And it's very rare that they're really going to be like, a perfect pair with each other, right? It's mm-hmm. more going to be like you're eating one cheese at a time with one accompaniment. So you can always choose on visuals. But yeah, I definitely plan in terms of soft texture and milk type mainly.
No, that's absolutely something that I'm going to steal. I'm going to make myself look more ballery, and I'm going to go there.
Oh yeah,
because I'm very much I'm a food guy, and whenever we watch award shows, right? So we'll do. I think the previous time we did we're going to do this, we're going to have this. I remember. I think it was the year that Prince passed away, and I was like, I'm going to do a Prince 75. And she was like, what's that? And I was like, I use that. It's basically a French 75, but I'm using the P gin, that gin that looks purple. And
love it.
She was like, wow, you are. And I sent her a menu, and I was like, it's a cheese board and involved as well. And she was like, you're really thinking this out. And I was like, oh no, this is what I'm into. So I'm definitely going to be a person that makes my own board, and definitely I'm stealing from you, what you just described.
Yeah.
So I got two more real questions for you before we get to those rapid fire questions. So, FireFly Farms, the market, all of it has a great reputation. Like it's in those kind of best of lists. It's award winning product. So how does inclusion in those sorts of publications and that sort of acknowledgement help or affect the business? Tell me about that.
Sure. I think thus far, at least just purely the retail business, is a little hard to tell. It kind of just happened. It's very exciting. It's extremely gratifying because obviously, unless you are just buried in foot traffic in any retail business, no matter how well it's going, there's this sense of you sometimes feel like you're shouting into the void just because it's easy to kind of put aside the nice things that customers say to you on the day-to-day basis because you think, oh, well, that's just my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. So getting an award is a nice thing. I would say in a certain way, not to minimize it, but less the award itself and more that it's a great mental cue for you to sit with your staff and say, wow, we actually do a good job. Let's appreciate ourselves and feel good about what we do and kind of refocus on the good things that we do and feeling good about those things. In terms of just how does it affect the bottom line, it's a little difficult to tell right now. We're just coming out of the dog days of summer to a certain extent, and especially in cheese. But I think to a certain extent, most food things, that's the slowest time of the year. It's very useful. We get a lot of planning done for what's our real busy season, which is fall and winter. But I think TBD on the bottom line. We will see. In terms of over the course of the kind of company, I think on the cheese making side, the awards are absolutely invaluable, because when you are trying to scale from a very small thing to a more medium-sized thing, winning national or world awards gets the attention of the buyers who are running larger accounts. So gourmet grocers, chain stores, things like that. You know, if you win a World Cheese Award, if you win American Cheese Society awards year in and year out, even if it doesn't register at first, although it does, eventually the weight of numbers really does convince people. So we've had some major advances in that space as a company, mainly due to the efforts of our cheese making team back in Deep Creek and the sales team, which is, to be honest, right now, mostly my boss and the owner of the company, but was previously an amazing, talented food professional named Christy Menard. They've really done the legwork, and those awards really do help. As much as it's easy to put your "we're artisanal, awards don't matter" like punk rock vibe, that's just not true. Yeah. People do care about it, and it does register. So it does have a big impact.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, being candid in that regard. So here's the last real question I got for you. So when we go into like these sort of leadership roles and having just, you know, kind of being a face, being attached in this way of, you know, you're in a leadership role. Tell me about certain lessons that you've learned in maybe previous roles and previous experiences in your career or even education that you're like, I don't know if that's how that works in practice. Like, you know, people will say these old adages, it takes money to make money. Sure, but I think this is really what it is. Or it's not, it's business, never personal, what have you. But then we have this kind of work stoppage thing that happens, and people are leaving because they don't feel like seen or respected or what have you. So tell me about like those lessons that you had to unlearn and how you kind of do your business.
I think the last one you said is far and away the one that is most incorrect. It's business, it's not personal. I think it's intensely personal. It's more personal than I would even want it to be, even though I'm someone who cares deeply about the personal, both in a professional sense and in the world. You know, just wanting there to be more niceness and positive energy out there in the world, especially now at this moment in time. Not to be Pollyannish, just more like if we could all be a little more thoughtful and think the best of each other, probably a lot of things would go better. But if I can be totally honest, I find the leadership part of the job by far the most challenging. It's not that difficult for me to be a maniac, to find the best logistics route, to source the best billion dry goods that I want. I've been in this industry long enough. I have enough friends who also know what's what. I love that side of it. And it's not like, oh, I wake up and I just magically find these things, but I can do that. That's in my toolbox. And that's a relatively concrete thing. I find the personal side of things, making sure your customers and your employees feel heard and respected, and making sure they know that you're actually thinking of them when you make the actions that you make. I find that the hardest thing, because it's one thing to actually put the thought in. That takes time and effort and emotional energy. But it's a frustrating truism in life that the thought honestly doesn't really count at the end of the day if the person can't see that or can't feel that. It doesn't matter how much I've thought about the weekly schedule or my regular customers, the product that will make them think of their summer home that they haven't gotten to in a while, if I don't tell them or I don't show them that I've done that. And there's that lightly performative aspect to business and public life challenging. And I think it's a thing that a lot of people struggle with because it's difficult to, first of all, it's difficult to read other people's minds in a certain way, right? And there's this level of understanding what the other person is thinking that's just inherently challenging, or certainly I find it challenging. I won't necessarily speak for other people. And then there's that performative aspect is very hard because it also has to seem or actually be genuine. And so kind of threading that needle of doing the performative thing to show your work, as they would say, like in, middle school math class, you don't always want to do that. It can feel like a weird ego thing, but actually over time I've come to realize, oh, you're not stroking your own ego and showing how great you are. You're trying to show them that you are caring. So I personally find that to be a real challenge in business, and I've definitely, I think that you always got to understand that on a certain level, no matter what you want, it always actually is personal, and that can be deeply frustrating, but it's just true. And so the best thing that you can do is, you got to keep in mind what is right for your store and your employees and your customers. And you sometimes have to make hard decisions that disappoint people. But if you're willing to explain that to the people who you're making those decisions on behalf of, or kind of sometimes against in a certain way, when you're not buying this new wine, or you're not picking up this product, or you're discontinuing a product that some customers have loved and others have not loved, you just have to be very honest about the thought that went into that, and your understanding that it won't please everyone, but your responsibility is to do what you think is best at the end of the day.
100%. And thank you for sharing that. I think I'm on the same page with you.
Yeah.
So with that, I think that's a good place for us to stop with the real portion, and let's get into the director's cut portion of this interview. So with these questions, don't overthink them. I like to give people that preface.
Sure.
So I'm going to start with something kind of easy or what have you. What would be your weapon of choice in the zombie apocalypse?
I'm going to go, even though I've literally never held one, I'm going to go size, because I just love Raphael from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay, we might have to be boys now, because that was a very great answer. Favorite cartoon growing up is just segue at this point.
Oh, sure. Okay, my favorite cartoon is this obscure cartoon called Galaxy Rangers, because my father and a colleague of his wrote the music to it, and it's one of the main things we had on VHS. If you've never seen it, it has a very badass 80s theme written by my father, but also it's this in retrospect, now seeing it for what it is, it's this hilarious, weird mix of literally space cowboys, like they ride robot horses, but also like bootleg X-Men, like redheaded psychic, smart guy, except in a quasi-racist 80s thing. Instead of having blue skin, it's just that he's black, but he's good at like computers and he's a genius. And then they have the overly stern leader guy. Instead of shooting beams out of his eyes, he has a beam cannon out of his bionic arm, but he's very gruff and like stern, Cyclops energy. And then there's the wild card guy who is a super soldier. He does have a healing factor. He doesn't have claws. He can just adapt to whatever environment he is, but somehow that almost always turns into claws.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, it's really good.
I did a deep dive on these kind of like pretty much everything is streaming. So you're kind of like looking for certain things, and I like to go obscure. And I don't know if you remember this, but I think we're in the same age group. So you've probably seen this, Exo Squad.
Oh, yeah.
It is so mid, and I went through it. I was like, "Yo, this is bad. This is not good."
Oh yeah.
Who thought this was good? They try to be fake woke too, because everyone has a ridiculous like ethnic. Their bio is like, he's an Israeli, blah blah blah. This person's Irish. And I was like, Who cares? They're in mech suits. That's all I'm here for.
Yeah, the question is, which one of those was fake woke earlier, Exo Squad or Captain Planet? I feel like it brings bootleg Captain Planet energy for sure.
Absolutely.
But that might be wrong.
So here's the next one I got for you. Which fortune do you wish to get in a fortune cookie?
I mean, I always like a non-fortune. But I mean, if we're getting an actual fortune, I frequently want the one that's like food related, where it's like later you will be happy with what you ate. Like it's a joke kind of vibes about how good the restaurant is. That's probably what I want.
Okay. Yeah. So I got a couple more here. What is the best pun you can think of? You seem to be a guy with a good sense of humor. So what's the best pun you can think of?
Oh, I mean, I'm very juvenile and my wife's a geologist. So I really always love joints relieve stress, which is an actual road sign that you see.
My gosh. Thank you. I like puns, and I'm not a dad, but I'm getting closer and closer to that stage where it's just like you're losing your coolness quotient. You're just gonna it's just gonna be puns and dad jokes for the next like 30 years.
Oh yeah.
I heard that we are often as good at or better than what we do in the day to day in our kind of side projects. Like we are doing very well in the side missions. Do you have a side project that you kind of spend time in that you're like, you know what, maybe one day I could do this as my full-time thing?
Well, I have a side project I considered but kind of discarded. I know I'm good at it, but I've realized I don't actually want to do it really for money, having done it briefly for money, which is making jam. I love making homemade jam. I've been doing it for about, a little more than a decade now. So I make jam, and then with the leftover fruit, I make weird alcohol things out of it. And I do think I'm quite good at it. But yeah, doing it at scale for money is not fun.
Nah. Well, that's kind of it as far as like the real questions. Did you have the rapid fire questions? Did you have any questions for me before we kind of wrap up here and get into the shameless plugs and such?
Sure. I mean, as long as we're going deep dive cheesy cartoons, I always want to ask people, Thundercats or Silverhawks?
Ooh, you pulled out Silverhawks. I love Silverhawks. I had a Japanese import of it at one point.
That's a minority opinion, I think, but I like it.
I mean, they had when they got to those later seasons with Hot Wings and he was black, I was like, I think I'm all set here. I think I'm all good, guys. But classic Copper Kid, and I didn't know what a mime was. I was like, yeah, I'm here for it. This is weird. And yeah, Monstar, 80s hair with the guitarist chick that was part of the Monstar gang. Great. Just chef kiss. So with that, I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast and kind of chopping it up with me, talking little cartoons, talking little cheese. And I want to invite and encourage you to tell the fine folks where to check you out in social media and in person. So the floor is yours.
Sure. So again, stores FireFly Farms Market. In person, you can see me there at least Tuesday to Saturday, but everyone who works there is pretty fantastic. We're at 3300 Clipper Mill Road in Whitehall Mill. We are, I literally always forget our Instagram handle, even though I'm the one who runs it. We are FireFly Market Baltimore on Instagram. We also have a little separate one for the wine. That's FireFly Farms Wine. If you want to look at my personal Instagram, it is public. It's not fun. It's mostly children's photos. I post about 3 times a year now. It's just Jay Galdston. Check it out sometime. It's not cool at all.
So there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Jesse Galdston from FireFly Farm Market, FireFly Market Baltimore, for coming on to the podcast and spending a yarn with me. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's food and just great vibes in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.